When news broke that Sophie Cunningham inked a $2 million deal with Project B, the shock wasn't just about the number, it was about what it represented. In a sport where top players rarely break six figures, Cunningham's new contract shattered the glass ceiling with the sound of a warning shot. Sources say a behind-the-scenes message quickly followed. Crossing into this new league could cost her more than just endorsement deals. It could burn bridges with old teammates, unions, and the league she once called home. And yet, Cunningham made her choice, a signal that the rules of engagement have changed for good. Her decision flips the old script on its head. Women's basketball is no longer just about loyalty or legacy.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
It's about leverage. With Project B offering wealth, equity, and global reach, it's clear that the future will belong to those who see their careers as businesses, not just dreams. The industry is watching, the players are calculating, and the system is bracing for a reshuffle that no warning can. Sophie Cunningham just made a move that has the entire women's basketball world on edge. She signed with Project B, a brand new, high-stakes, high-paying league that's not just trying to compete with the WNBA. It's trying to take over. And Sophie didn't just sign a contract. She made a statement. She broke ranks with tradition. She chose money, autonomy, and focus over loyalty to a system that has kept players underpaid, overburdened, and boxed in. And now, she's catching heat. Let's be clear, Sophie didn't sneak off and sign a side deal. This was loud, public, intentional. And as soon as her name dropped as one of the first major stars to join Project B, the reaction from the old guard was immediate. She got warned. Behind-the-scenes pressure, internal criticism, not from fans, but from the very institutions that were supposed to have her back. Because this wasn't just about her signing with a new league, it was about what that signing represents. Project B is paying players real money. We're talking annual salaries that top $2 million, compared to the WNBA's maximum salary that doesn't even touch $300,000. And beyond the paycheck, Project B is offering equity. Ownership. Players aren't just on the court. They have a stake in the league itself. They're shareholders, investors, partners. And that's why this changes everything. Sophie's decision isn't just a bold move, it's a blueprint. For players who are tired of scraping by. For athletes who want to focus on basketball instead of being human billboards for leagues that don't deliver. She stepped outside the system and signed on to something that actually values her time, her image, and her talent. That scared people. Because when one player leaves, it's easy to say she's the exception. But when Sophie, one of the most recognizable names in the game, makes that jump, it sets off alarms across the entire landscape. Executives start calling emergency meetings. Agents start fielding calls. And leagues like Unrivaled and the WNBA start bracing for the fallout. And that fallout has already begun. Project B is not playing small. Their schedule overlaps directly with Unrivaled, forcing players to choose. And they've structured contracts that prohibit athletes from bouncing between leagues. This isn't a side gig. It's a takeover. They're consolidating talent, snapping up top names, and staking out global ambitions with exclusive deals, international media strategies, and branding plans that go way beyond basketball. Sophie Cunningham isn't just a player in this league. She's the face of it. She's the statement, the disruption, the proof that a player can leave a legacy system behind and still come out on top. And let's talk about why that matters. For years, the narrative around women's sports has been, do it for the love of the game. Play because it matters. Sacrifice because progress is slow. But love doesn't cover rent. And sacrifice doesn't build wealth. Cunningham made it clear she wants to play ball, not play politics. She's not interested in being a mascot for causes she didn't sign up for. She wants to compete, get paid, and walk away with something to show for it. That approach isn't popular in every circle. And that's exactly why she's being warned. Because when you say no to the unspoken rules of how you're supposed to behave as a woman in sports, how much you're supposed to give, how little you're supposed to expect in return, you disrupt more than just business. You disrupt identity. You expose that the system isn't sustainable. that it's been built on undervaluing the very people it claims to elevate. And Project B is capitalizing on that disconnect. They're not just offering a better paycheck. They're offering a better model, one that cuts through the guilt, the gatekeeping, and the you should be grateful energy that's hovered over the WNBA for years. And the league's response? Try to paint players like Sophie as disloyal, as problematic, as distractions. But here's the thing. Cunningham didn't betray the system. The system failed her. Because if there was any legitimate reason for players to stay, they wouldn't be walking away. They wouldn't need $2 million checks to lure them out. They'd be valued where they already are. But that's not the case. And as long as the pay gap remains this massive, players will keep looking for something better. And they're going to find it. Project B isn't just focused on the U.S. market. It's aiming for global reach. Cross-promotional events with international giants like Formula One. High-level media partnerships. They're building a sports product with international appeal, and that's where Sophie's star power fits perfectly. She's not just bringing skill, she's bringing attention. Attention that's now redirected away from the WNBA. And that's a problem for the old system. Because the media buzz, it's real. Fans are asking where to watch Project B. They want to see what's next, what Cunningham's doing. And that's the worst-case scenario for a league like Unrivaled, which has already been struggling to establish its identity. Compared to the polish, professionalism, and financial weight of Project B, it starts to look amateur. And that gap is growing. Meanwhile, the WNBA finds itself in a complex position. It wants to support player empowerment, but not when empowerment means walking away. It wants to grow the sport, but only within its own structure. And it certainly doesn't want its union leaders, like Nneka Agwamike, playing roles in rival leagues while still representing the interests of WNBA players. That's where the ethical cracks start to show. Because how can someone negotiate contracts in one league while holding ownership or influence in another? How can players trust union leadership when that leadership is crossing over into a new, better-funded league that could gut the one they're supposed to be protecting? These aren't minor questions. These are existential, and Sophie Cunningham's move brought them all to the surface. Her decision is already forcing institutions to make choices, to either adapt or fall behind. And if the current system doesn't shift quickly, doesn't match Project B's energy, incentives, and respect for players, then more athletes will follow. Because once that door opens, it doesn't close. This is the beginning of a new business model in women's sports. One where athletes have leverage. One where compensation is fair, ownership is shared, and players don't have to justify wanting a career and a paycheck. And that's what Cunningham made clear. She's not here to play the role people expect of her. She's not staying in a broken system out of loyalty. She's not waiting for change. She is the change. So when she got that warning, it wasn't just about Project B. It was about power, about fear, about an industry that knows the old rules don't work anymore, but doesn't want to admit it. But Cunningham didn't flinch. She didn't backtrack. She signed her name, took the deal, and walked into a league that treated her like a professional. Finally. Now it's up to everyone else to decide whether they're coming with her or getting left behind. Tell us what you think. Is Sophie Cunningham setting the new standard or crossing a line? Would you make the same call if you were in her shoes? Drop a comment. Like the video if you think this move is going to change everything. And share it with someone who's still clinging to the old playbook. And hit subscribe, because if this is the first warning, just wait until the rest of the league starts listening. Because here's the reality. The game has changed, and there's no going back. Sophie Cunningham isn't just part of that shift. She is the shift. She represents the breaking point for a lot of players who've spent years biting their tongues, balancing off-season contracts overseas, and accepting less than they're worth. And now, with one signature, she's put every other league on notice. For the longest time, the status quo relied on one thing: silence. Silence about pay. Silence about burnout. Silence about what it really means to be a woman in professional sports. That silence has kept a lot of systems running. Just enough visibility to market, just enough compensation to avoid collapse, just enough loyalty to delay change. But what Sophie just did, that cracked the silence wide open. because she's not alone. She's the first high-profile name to flip, but she's not the last. The whispers are already louder. Other players are watching. Veterans with years of league loyalty and no real nest egg. Rookies who don't want to have to split their time between a 5-month domestic season and a 7-month overseas one just to make a living wage. They see what Project B is offering. They see Sophie's name trending. They see the warning she got, and more importantly, they see her not caring. That's power. The kind of power athletes in women's basketball haven't had in decades. Let's talk about the numbers again because they matter. Project B is handing out contracts that start at $2 million per year. That's nearly 7 times what the WNBA's best players are getting. And that doesn't even include equity, ownership stakes, revenue shares. These are just salaries. They're investments. These deals turn players into partners, not just performers. They give them something to build, not just borrow. It's not hard to see why that's attractive. The WNBA has done a lot of things right in recent years. Growth in visibility, an uptick in sponsorships, better media deals. But at the end of the day, the money hasn't followed at the same pace. And you can't expect players to wait forever. You can't sell them on what could be while someone else is offering them what is, and the WNBA knows it. That's why Sophie Cunningham's move wasn't brushed off. It was challenged. Quietly, carefully, but still challenged. That warning she got? It wasn't casual. It was calculated. It was the system saying, you're rocking the boat. It was a signal to others. Stay in line or face the consequences. But here's the twist. They're too late. Project B isn't an experiment anymore. It's a movement. It's professional, it's polished, and it's built to scale. They're not here for scrimmages or off-season filler. They're signing major talent, aligning with global sports properties like Formula One, and building media relationships that the traditional leagues have struggled to sustain for decades. And Sophie? She's the proof of concept, the first domino, the test case. And the test is working. Look at the engagement. Look at the headlines. Look at how many fans are already asking when the games start, where they'll be streamed, and what other players might make the jump. It's not just a contract, it's a conversation, one that traditional leagues can no longer control. And this isn't just about league pride, it's about survival. If more top-tier athletes follow Sophie's lead, the WNBA will face a talent drain unlike anything it's experienced before. And while it's easy to claim players should stay loyal, loyalty only works when it's mutual. Sophie gave years to the league. She worked her way up. She played through the media cycles, the off-court expectations, the community appearances, the pressure to be more than just a player. And when a new opportunity finally came along that let her just be an athlete, she took it, and then came the backlash. Let's be honest, some of the reaction has nothing to do with basketball. Some of it's personal. Because Sophie didn't just leave, she rejected the performative narrative. She said she didn't want the extra noise. She didn't want the activism tied in every game, every promo, every appearance. And that's controversial. For a lot of people, the WNBA has built part of its identity around advocacy. And to be fair, that's something many players have embraced and even led. But that's not everyone's lane. And now, players like Cunningham are saying that out loud. I just want to play basketball. That simple sentence has become a dividing line. To some, it sounds like disengagement. To others, it's freedom. Either way, it's real. And that's what Project B is tapping into. They're not demanding anything from players beyond the game. No political narratives, no marketing burdens, no off-court performance requirements disguised as leadership. Just play, compete, get paid. That simplicity is disruptive. And it's working. Because for the first time in a long time, a professional women's league is giving players the chance to focus on basketball and build wealth. Not one or the other. Not passion or profit. Both. And when you do that, you don't just shift the sport, you shift the industry. The WNBA, unrivaled, and any other competing structure now have a choice to make. They can evolve, or they can fade. They can meet this moment with innovation, or they can scramble behind closed doors and hope players don't notice the gap. But they've already noticed. And here's the thing about warnings. They only work when the system still holds the power. But Sophie's move shows that grip is slipping. Because what happens when more players stop being afraid? What happens when the warning no longer scares them? When the alternative actually looks better? That's the new reality. And it's only just getting started. Sophie Cunningham didn't set out to dismantle the old guard. But she did. Because the minute she said yes to Project B, she exposed how much players have been settling, how low the bar has been, how desperately the system needs to change. And now that it's been exposed, there's no unseeing. So the question isn't whether this move was controversial, it's whether it was inevitable. And honestly, yeah, it was. The only surprise is that it took this long. If you've been watching women's basketball evolve over the years, you already know this moment was building. The salaries, the expectations, the limitations. It was a matter of when, not if, players would start demanding something more. And now, thanks to Project B, that more is finally on the table. Sophie Cunningham just grabbed it. And the message is loud and clear. No more waiting. No more loyalty without reciprocity. No more settling for less when more is finally possible. And let's be honest, there's no putting this genie back in the bottle. Sophie Cunningham's move to Project B didn't just disrupt the old model, it exposed it. For years, fans and players alike have tolerated a system that celebrated visibility but withheld value. The WNBA became the face of women's professional basketball, but that face came with limits. Limits on pay, limits on scheduling, limits on how much athletes could actually benefit from the brand they were building every time they stepped on the court. And then Project B came in and basically said, enough. That offer, over $2 million in guaranteed salary, plus equity, isn't just generous. It's game-changing. It's a recognition that these athletes are worth it, that they bring value, that they deserve the same investment male athletes have received for decades. And Sophie took that deal. She didn't apologize for it. She didn't downplay it. She said yes, proudly, and the response she got? Warnings. Not from fans, from insiders, from people who saw her decision as dangerous. Not because it was bad for the sport, but because it threatened the grip of institutions that never saw this coming. That warning wasn't about one player signing with one league. It was about the fear of what happens when the first domino falls. And now that it has, the reaction isn't denial, it's scrambling. Let's not forget, this isn't the first time a women's sports league has faced competition. But this time, the competitor isn't underfunded. It's not clunky or experimental. It's sleek, strategic, and well-resourced. Project B is stepping into this space like it owns it. And players like Sophie aren't just along for the ride. They're helping drive. That's what makes this moment so uncomfortable for traditional leagues. Because you can't call it a one-off anymore. Not when players with visibility, audience, and influence are walking away from the system you built. Not when they're doing it with confidence, with intention, and not when the public understands why. The financial gap is impossible to ignore. It's not a $100,000 difference. It's $1 million difference. Year after year. That's career-defining. That's life-changing. And for so long, women's basketball players were told that money like that simply wasn't possible. That the economics didn't support it. That the fan base wasn't big enough. That the demand just wasn't there. But Project B didn't ask those questions. It made the investment. And shocker, it's working. Because the demand has always been there. The audience has been growing for years. The fan base has been hungry for a product that respects its athletes. All it took was someone willing to take the risk. And now, Sophie Cunningham is showing what that risk can lead to. And let's talk about that risk for a second. She didn't take this leap with no consequences. She knew there would be backlash. She knew the league she left might try to freeze her out, that she could lose favor, future endorsements, access to legacy events, even relationships. But she still said yes, because the reward finally outweighed the risk. And that says everything. You don't walk away from a league you've helped build unless you know for a fact that something better is waiting. And Sophie clearly does. So do the players who are texting their agents right now. So do the fans who are already looking up Project B schedules and wondering who's next. Because it's no longer about whether Project B can compete. It's about how long the traditional leagues can hold on. Unrivaled? They're already feeling it. They were banking on exclusivity, visibility, media-friendly formats. But when your stars are suddenly signing elsewhere, on long-term contracts, no less, it gets real hard to sell your league as the future, especially when your direct competition is throwing seven-figure contracts and global branding opportunities into the mix. The WNBA? They've got more stability, more infrastructure, but even they can't ignore this shift. Their top players are unionizing. Some of those union leaders are now reportedly aligning with Project B. That's not just awkward. That's a serious conflict of interest. How do you lead labor negotiations for one league while investing in a rival? How do you represent players' best interests when you're playing both sides? That tension is only going to... And here's the wildest part. We are still early in this story. Sophie Cunningham might be the headline right now, but there are more names coming. More signings. More exits. More players who've been watching this unfold quietly, weighing the pros and cons. And every one of them now has a precedent. That's what makes this different from every past attempt at alternative leagues. This time, there's a path, a plan, a player who made the jump and didn't regret it. That alone changes the conversation in every locker room, every group chat, every meeting between agents and execs. Because the first one through the wall always takes the heat. Sophie's taking it right now. But after her, it gets easier. So the leagues that want to survive, they need to respond fast. Not with more warnings. Not with loyalty speeches. Not with nostalgia. With action. With new structures. With better pay. With real support. Because the moment for change isn't coming. It's already here. Tell us what you think. Would you take the deal? Is Sophie Cunningham the face of the future? Or did she jump too soon? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Like this video if you think the old system had it coming. And share this with someone who's been following the evolution of women's basketball for years. And subscribe, because if Sophie's move caused this much noise, just wait until the next one signs.